Hi, I'm the Director for Common Knowledge Trust, and if you've watched any of the other videos, you know that we produce Birthing Better Childbirth Preparation online course. I'm going to continue today with talking about one of the ebooks in this course, and this one is called Directed Breathing. In some of the other videos, I talked about the Sustainable Breathing ebook, about how important it is to have breathing patterns that adjust and adapt to the internal and external experience you're having while you're giving birth. We went over the 4 ways that humans breathe. We went over the ability to create space inside your pelvis on an inhalation and soften inside your pelvis on an exhalation. We talked a little bit about your partner being able to model good breathing patterns, which means that when your partner hears you sound stressed when you're breathing, then they can model the good breathing pattern that you've discovered as you've investigated the 4 ways that humans breathe and the breathing patterns that create as much relaxation and focus for yourself. So today we want to talk about directed breathing. All of these skills were developed by families. Not a magic bullet. I didn't wake up one day and go, oh yay, skills. What happened was that I worked with hundreds of families who picked apart their birth experience, or they picked apart the fears and anxieties that they had about their forthcoming birth experience. And breathing was one of those topics. There were many yoga instructors who did not find yoga breathing helpful during their birth, particularly when the pain got intense, because the pain of labor contractions is nothing like the stretching in yoga, while others found it very helpful. There are other people who use the Bradley method breathing, in the nose and out the mouth, but when you talk to their partners, what they heard instead of relaxed breathing was very stressed breathing. They heard, ah, or, oh, oh, and that doesn't sound in control. So it's really important that you develop good breathing patterns, and you know what they are, you know what they feel like, and you have practiced them during your pregnancy. It's just so important. You will not use skills unless you've practiced them. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, because we have an ebook about being practiced and the importance of it. This doesn't mean that you have to take a long time to practice every day. It means that you have to develop a consciousness and integrate the skills. And as we all know, you can't practice birth before you have it. So you have to imagine yourself having a birth, and you practice the skills, but we'll talk about that later. So today what I want to talk to you is about directed breathing. Often when people talk about their births, they talk about it in 3 different ways. What time? So people will say, I went into labor at 3 o'clock in the morning, or we drove to the hospital at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was prepped at 11, and I had my surgery at 1, or they'll say my water bag broke at 11 p.m. and I labored all night and I gave birth 24 hours later. So that's a birth story that's focused on time, and we know that. That's very common. We also know that people tell their birth story in terms of how they perceive of what other people did around them. I couldn't stand it when my husband touched me, or I had such a rough internal, I couldn't stand it, or they were very, very nice to me and very kind, or the room was cold, or I was uncomfortable being so exposed. So people talk about what happens to them. And then the 3rd way people talk about their birth stories is what their experiences are. I got lost. I didn't know where I was. Well, people knew they were in the hospital or at home, but it meant that they weren't certain about what was happening inside them. Or I had terrible pain in my hip, or terrible back labor, or the contractions went on and on and on. Or they were one on top of one another, or they seemed not to progress. I felt my baby was stuck. So we have 3 ways we talk about our birth stories, which is the time frame that the birth took place, what other people did to them or around them, and how they experienced their own experience of birth. Very rarely do you ever hear people talk about skills, which is sad, because for an experience that is a one-off and happens infrequently and is so transforming to everybody's life, you'd think that we would want it to become highly skilled, which is what families, Birthing Better families, wanted. And this is why we worked so hard to produce a resource and to contain that resource in a charitable organization where the proceeds of all of the sales go back to further the concept that all families should be skilled to birth their babies. So one of the issues had to do with the sensations. I had terrible back labor, I had pain in my pubic bone, I had pain down my inside of my thighs. Whatever the pain was, whatever the discomfort was, you were breathing all the time. So we discovered that you could actually direct your breathing to those areas of discomfort. And knowing that you could inhale and expand or exhale and soften, then you could direct your breathing to those areas of discomfort and either expand inside them or soften inside them. Now, there are people who say, yeah, but you can't direct your breathing, you only breathe in your lungs. We do, and your lungs do not migrate around your body. In order to do this, what you do is you intentionally focus your breath into another part of your body, and your lungs are still doing the expansion and the contraction. But many of us have heard chest breathing, belly breathing. So the lungs aren't in your belly, but you expand your belly. In fact, when you look at your babies breathing, or young children, they're belly breathers, they're not chest breathers, because the diaphragm sinks down on an inhalation and relaxes on an exhalation as it comes back up again. But we can even go further than that. You can actually direct your breathing to any part of your body. You can put your hand on your upper thigh and just say, I'm going to breathe in to that area under my hand, and you'll have some sensation of expansion as you breathe in. And then if you soften on an exhalation, then you know that you have used your breathing to direct it to that area. And we have another skill in the Right Touch ebook that talks about how important it is to develop touch as a cue to expand and to soften. So what we found was if women had back labor, they could actually breathe in to the sacrum, which is at the end of the spine, and they could breathe in and expand that sacrum, and they could breathe out and soften on the inside of it. Now, one or the other worked best. Some people found the expansion worked really well and reduced the discomfort. Didn't mean to say it always went away 100%, but they could cope better knowing they could do something. That's the use of skills. Or they found that that didn't work. That made it tenser, tighter, in which cases they softened. They felt more relief. So that's called directed breathing. And we have an ebook that talks about directed breathing specifically. So we hope you enjoyed this talk, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.